So abstaining from the marital act while married, you know, people are probably confused by the title and what I mean by that. And I'm going to offer up the, best explanation possible of what that even means in this case. And I think a lot of people out there, I think, could relate to this. They might be in similar situations. And so I want to offer up, my discernment and the conclusion that I've brought myself to, and something that I find, beautifully frustrating. And I mean that as a half of a joke, because there's something incredibly beautiful about having an answer for all things regarding faith and morals, love, marriage, within the Catholic Church, within the Catholic faith. And this is very much something that um, brought me back to the church. So here's what I mean. As a baptized Catholic, is what I am. Even though I fell away, I'm a baptized Catholic. My wife was not is not a baptized Catholic. She got baptized as a Protestant. This was before we got married, and so I came to the knowledge rather recently that if there's a baptized Catholic and an unbaptized, believer or unbeliever that are married, that it's technically not a marriage that is recognized as a sacramental marriage within the Catholic Church. And the timing in which I found this out was actually rather interesting and providential when I look back. May the 7th of this year is when I got confirmed, and that was, one of the best days of my life. I got confirmed as a Catholic, and the very next morning, I'm not even joking, the very next morning, I woke up, and I don't even know how I stumbled upon this, but I was on Twitter and I stumbled upon this people having the discussion that, if you have a baptized Catholic and an unbaptized person married, that it's unrecognized as a sacramental marriage, and therefore the marital act should be abstained from until the marriage is convalidated. And this obviously was, quite the shock to me, because I had absolutely no idea. And I said, well, this can't be true. Well, upon further conversations with, close friends of mine, that really helped, guide me through this process, and even a couple of different priests, because I was personally trying to search for the answer that I wanted to hear, not the cold, blunt truth. And that's why I'm so, grateful to have amazing friends, the CMAS crew, super based guys. They're such a blessing, and priests that really care about their vocation and guiding the souls of people correctly. And the conclusion was this: that if I wanted to continue partaking in the sacraments, the sacrament of reconciliation, of course, the Eucharist, that I actually had to abstain from the marital act with my wife, and that we had to live what's called a Josephite marriage, meaning we'd have to abstain until this convalidation process was complete, and that the marriage was recognized as a sacramental marriage by the church. The flip side, there was another option, was we already have children, we're already living together. So the horse has left the cart, if you will. And so if we wanted to continue having the marital act, I'd have to abstain from partaking in the sacraments, particularly the Eucharist. And so this came as a bit of a shock to me. It kind of shook my, foundation for a little bit. And I kind of went back and forth and back and forth. My wife and I want to have another child. And, we didn't know how long the convalidation process was going to take. And so long story short, since then, from May, onwards, I didn't really, I tried not to think about it too much. However, I was becoming increasingly convicted by the day, by the week, especially as the further I got away from reconciliation and from partaking in the Eucharist, where, and I had, several conversations with people, with friends, close friends about this, and this conviction. It's like God was pulling me toward this abstinence, and getting the paperwork and everything in order for convalidation. Looks like it was going to take, a couple of months to do, somewhere within the range of probably, 4 to 12 weeks, depending on how quickly we wanted to go through it. Some people take a little bit longer. My wife and I were, quite busy, but this is something that we were going to prioritize. So I said, okay. I remember a friend, a client of mine, a mentorship client of mine. He asked me a question, and he said, well, Mike, before you guys got married the first time around, obviously I didn't have full knowledge of any of this before. He said, well, did you abstain then? Did you honor your marriage then? I said, well, no, we weren't chaste. In fact, if I were to really humble myself and admit the truth, my wife wanted to abstain, but I didn't. I was still kind of under the red pill, indoctrination at that time. I said, well, why should I wait? I was very much a cherry picker of the Bible at that time, despite believing in Jesus. And so I did not honor um, our marriage the first time around. He said, well, what beautiful way, especially now that you've come to the fullness of truth in the Catholic faith, what better way to honor God and your marriage by abstaining now until convalidation? And that was quite convicting for me. And upon further prayer and discussion, this is the conclusion that I've come to, is that I would rather abstain from the marital act at this time momentarily as an act of, penance to God and to honor God, of course. And so I can continue to partake in the sacraments, because that is more important than the marital act. I just become increasingly convicted of that point, that every time I would go to mass and I would see people taking the Eucharist, and I would listen to podcasts and people talking about confession, the further away I got from those things, the more sort of chaos I felt in my spirit, and I felt like it was doing harm to my spiritual life, and especially as the leader of my home. And so, not an easy decision to make, but again, it was multi-pronged in the sense that I wanted to honor God. We are all indebted to Him, because we have all this sin that's pent up, and almost as a way of paying back that sexual sin that I've committed in the past, and especially with my wife before marriage. And so the honoring of God, the honoring of my marriage, the honoring of my wife, and an opportunity, because of the space that I'm in and the things that I talk about, an opportunity to practice what I preach, is that I talk about guys waiting until marriage and practicing chastity. And if I can't put my money where my mouth is, then who am I to say anything to anybody? Who am I to offer up any kind of advice? And so I tried to ignore it for a period of time, and I could no longer ignore it. I think God was really speaking loudly to me. I mean, like I just said, I found this out the day after getting confirmed, and the timing there isn't coincidental. I don't believe in coincidence. It's only by God's providence that we come to this kind of knowledge, and with full knowledge comes full responsibility and full culpability. And I said I'd be acting and speaking as a hypocrite if I didn't go through with this. And for a time, I thought, well, okay, I'll just abstain from the sacraments at this time as instructed by a priest with these two options. But that didn't feel like the correct option. That felt like I was putting the marital act before my faith, before my leadership as a husband and as a father. And this is why I'm so grateful to have such close friends, Will Noland and Tim Gordon being the godparents of my children, God willing, in a week and a half when they get baptized. And I remember having a discussion with the both of them, but I spoke to Tim on the phone. He said, this is advice that I would give my goddaughter, your daughter, God willing, and that I cannot speak for whether or not God will have mercy on you if you, God forbid, get into a car crash, and if you weren't in a state of grace. We both agree that God is not bound by scripture, tradition, the sacraments. Of course not. Of course he isn't. But that's something that I really wanted to take that gamble with. We want to try to tip the scales in our favor to the best of our ability. And above all, our lives are not living for ourselves, but it's living for God, according to his law, according to his word. And, I go back to that phrase, the beautifully frustrating nature of the Catholic faith. But again, very much something that is what brought me back in the first place, was this rigidity that I love so much. So to anybody out there that, whether if you're a woman that's a baptized Catholic and you're married to somebody that's not, or a man that's a baptized Catholic married to somebody that's not and hasn't gotten their marriage convalidated, I am now giving you the full knowledge of the brevity of the situation, the gravity of the situation. And I'm not just trying to spread the frustration, so to speak, but I think it could be a real powerful means of sanctification for you as a couple, for you as a man or as a woman. Get your marriage convalidated, get it recognized as a sacramental marriage, but in the process, really denying yourself and honoring your spouse, honoring God above all things, and continuing to be able to participate in the sacraments, which are a beautiful gift from God, especially, the Eucharist. And again, I went to confession again yesterday, confess all these things, had a long, beautiful conversation with the priest, and I left, and the sun and the air and everything hits different after you leave confession. It really feels like a weight is just lifted off your shoulders. And it's incredible, and it reaffirmed this decision. It's not an easy decision. When you think about it, it should be an easy decision, but in actual practical application, it's not an easy decision. However, the walk as a Catholic, the act of carrying the cross, I think people talk about it a lot, and it sounds really cool, and it is really cool, but in actual practical application, it's really hard. That thing is very heavy. You're walking a very narrow path, and you're dragging it. Sometimes you're falling down. Um, um, but we're not meant to live for ourselves. We're meant to live for God. And what more beautiful way to honor God and honor your spouse by this momentary period of abstinence, in penance to God, and in it being or you viewing it as a means of sanctification, and not to receive all the graces from God in the process, but to honor him regardless if he gives us anything back for it. That's the point. That's the heart posture. And so, a difficult decision, certainly it was, but one that I feel very convicted by, and it's definitely the right decision. And now I'm more excited than ever to dive deeper into my faith, um, to continue to participate in the sacraments, and it being such a beautiful way to sort of right the wrongs that I've done in the past in my marriage to my wife. And um, again, part of the reason I just absolutely love this beautiful Catholic faith that we have. Praise the Lord. So just wanted to share that story with you guys. Glory to Jesus Christ, and thank you again.